Hi guys. So this is the video for CKLA Treasure Island, lesson 7, I think. We're on lesson 7. Just a forewarning for this video. My cat is trying to eat my toes, so he might make an appearance. He's being very cuddly right now, but he does not know how to show affection, so he's trying to bite me. And my next door neighbor, Mr. Smotches, your future 5th grade teacher, math teacher, is out mowing his lawn, so you might hear some of that in the background too. So let's get started. It's gonna be a fairly short video. You do have a bit of work to do off camera though, or without the video. So first step, we are rereading the chapter. I mean, you are, I'm not. Chapter 4, What I Heard in the Apple Barrel. Your first job, or I mean, you can do this later if you want to, or I mean, you have to do it, but I don't care when you do it. You can do it right now at the beginning, or you can do it after our workbook pages. So first or last step, whatever, you have to read chapter 4 again. I read it once on video for the lesson 6 video, so if you want to listen to that again, you can, or go through and read it on your own, okay? But it's pages 34 through 43, okay? Ouch, Mac, don't bite. So chapter 4, read that first or at the end, but that is one thing you have to do for this lesson. The rest of it is just workbook pages about your adventure story that we've been planning, okay? So, we kind of talked a little bit and you planned a bit about your character and your setting. So on page 29 in your workbook, this was a while ago, but you guys planned out your setting and you planned out your main character, your memorable hero character. Okay, so I would flip to this page first and kind of remember what your character's name was, what they looked like, what they sounded like. So just kind of check out what you had written on page 29 and page 30 about your character, okay? And then after that, once you remember, oh yep, that's my character, then flip to page 57. Okay, so this is the first page for this lesson. We are just doing 2 pages of planning for your adventure story. So this page here on 57 is just brainstorming chart for different elements you need to think about for your story. Okay, so hopefully you have a story in mind. Remember, your main character is stuck on an island or in the mountains or in the jungle. He or she is stuck somewhere, right? By themselves, and they need to figure out how to get back or how to escape or get home, okay? So hopefully you have something in mind. We have talked about our adventure stories a little bit, but now we're really going to be talking about, start to finish, what are some things we want to include in your story? So it's shape, okay? So these are the questions that you're going to go through and answer. You can pause after every question, after I explain what you're writing in each box, and fill it out as you go, or listen to the entire explanation and then fill out this page. But you're going to want to finish this page before we do the next one, okay? So this first box, this first question is, who are the main characters? And your character is going to be part of your introduction, okay? So I'm going to use my highlighter actually. If you have a highlighter or a colorful pen or marker or something, highlight introduction there. Okay, so in the introduction part of your story, you'll be introducing who your main characters are and, their names, what they look like, what their personalities are like, everything in detail, okay? So in this box, you definitely want your memorable hero from page 29. Okay, right here, you should have already planned what's your character's name back on page 29 during lesson 3. Okay, so whatever that character's name is, that's definitely a main character. You need to put their name here. And then, are there going to be any other characters in your story? So that you'll have to think about. Your main character is stuck by themselves somewhere, whatever your setting is. So maybe they aren't going to meet anybody else for a while, or maybe they're with people in the beginning, but then they get stuck later. So who are the other characters in your story? Main characters. And next question, where does your story take place? So that's the setting. So where is your story? And that was also on page 29. So flipping back to page 29, we have also planned the setting already of your story. And these were some ideas that I had come up with for you guys. So hopefully you chose one and picked your setting, okay? Where is your story? And that is also part of the introduction. So you can write that in that box. Where is your story taking place? Next, what is the problem or conflict? For example, do any of the characters have enemies? If so, who are they? So the problem or conflict in your story might just be that they're stuck and they need to figure out a way to get back home. Or maybe like in Treasure Island, you know, the problem is that Jim and the other good guys on the ship are, you know, stuck with a bunch of pirates who are going to try and kill them after they get the treasure. Big problem, right? So come up with some main problem. So the big idea of your story, what's the main problem? There might be lots of little problems that happen throughout your story, but what's the main problem? Okay. Oops, hold on. Mac, don't eat stuff. Bad cat. So highlight problem, conflict right there. Explain that in this box. And that's just an example. Enemies, okay? Your character doesn't have to have enemies. Like if it's just going to be an adventure story about like maybe you were in a plane crash and you got stuck in the mountains and it was snowy and you have to survive and find your way to civilization again to survive. That's a great adventure story, but there's probably not going to be any enemies you have to worry about, right? Unless for some reason you got stranded with your enemy and then, you know, you have to survive with your enemy, which would also be a great story, but that's just an example. Your story doesn't have to be about surviving with enemies or fighting an enemy, okay? It could be any problem you want. All right, for this box, list 3 challenges the characters face. So 3 challenges. You need number 1, number 2, and number 3. Okay, and these are small challenges that all lead up to like the big problem. So for example, how does the weather challenge the characters? Do they have shelter or must they build it? Where do they get food and water? Have they met anyone else? So this is all part of a section called Rising Action 1, Rising Action 2, and Rising Action 3. So these are 3 smaller problems, 3 challenges, okay? So weather, shelter, food and water, meeting anybody else while they're stranded or trying to survive. So any difficulties that your character is going to face. For example, like the story example I just said, you know, like if they are in a plane crash, like a little plane crash, and they got stuck in the mountains, snowy, blizzardy mountains, and they have to survive and find their way back home. Well, the weather is definitely going to be a challenge, okay? Snowy blizzard, stuck in the mountains, no shelter, you have to make your shelter. Very little food because it's snowy mountains. Lots of water though, you could melt snow. Okay, so I could come up with 3 challenges that my character's facing. For this box, what is the worst thing that happens to your character? And this section of your story is called the climax or the turning point. So this will make more sense as we look at the next page, but like the peak terribleness in your story, like towards the end of your story, the biggest action thing is going to happen, and then it's going to get resolved and things are going to get better, okay? So that'll make sense on the next page a little bit more, but so far what we know about Treasure Island, Jim's story, his adventure story, and we don't know everything yet because we're only on chapter 4, right? So we haven't gotten very far, but so far, you know, suspense is rising. They started their journey and they found out that they're stuck on the ship with pirates, and then they got to the island, and you know, the climax, the worst thing or the turning point, the biggest action thing, might end up being a big fight with the pirates on the island. Okay, and then things will kind of calm down after that. And then last on this page is, how is the problem or conflict solved? And that's called the resolution. Okay, so how do they solve their problem? How does your story end? We can't just like be talking about the pirates fighting Jim and Dr. Livesey and Trelawney, and we can't end right there, right? We have to like solve it. We have to know who wins and what happens afterwards. Okay, that's the resolution. So how does your story end? Is there a happy ending? How do they solve their problem? That goes here. Okay, so you can pause here and try and fill out as much as you can. These last couple, you may not know, exactly what you want to do for that just yet. It might make a little bit more sense after I explain the next page, so I'll do that now. 58 is a blank page, so 59 right here. This should look familiar. In some of your earlier grades, you should have seen like a story map like this. It's called the shape of a story in CKLA, but it's just sort of a chart that shows the action rising in a story, okay? And so these are all the parts that we had talked about. Here's your introduction, your problem, and your conflict. So introduction, problem and conflict, rising action 1, 2, and 3, rising action 1, 2, and 3, your climax or turning point, the climax of your story, like the highest peak of it, and your resolution down here. Okay, so that's every part we just talked about, and now you're gonna kind of copy each thing, and they'll have A, B. So introduction was A, problem and conflict was B, rising action 1, 2, and 3 was C, climax or turning point D, resolution E. Okay, so you're copying whatever you said for your resolution right here. Okay, what was the biggest action? What was the worst thing to happen to your characters? This is where you introduce your characters. Okay, so anyway, getting ahead of myself. The way we read this kind of chart, this is the start of your story. Okay, so your story starts here. Green for start, red for end. This is the end of your story. So we're going along. Here's the beginning of your story. You're just sort of introducing things here. And I'm going to draw arrows, and you can too. So here's your introduction. You're just introducing characters. You're just introducing the setting. Kind of what's going on so far in your story. Who are we talking about? Where are they? And then you're going to introduce your problem or your conflict. What's the problem? Okay, what's going on in your story? Then suspense is going to start rising. So action is going to start taking place. Suspense is this feeling of like adrenaline. Okay, it's when action is happening, you're feeling fearful or excited, and it's rising action. So here's the first challenge that happens. Okay, and then the next challenge is going to happen. Another challenge is going to happen. So in our story so far, Treasure Island, Jim and everybody has been introduced. The setting was the Admiral Benbow Inn in England, and then they were on the ship, and now they're finally at the island. But anyway, introduction, characters, setting. The problem was Jim found this pirate map, and they want to go and get the pirate treasure, right, from the island. And the rising action so far, we don't know the end of the story yet, but what we've read so far is that, they began their journey, and Jim overheard the conversation with John Silver about how they're pirates and they plan on taking over the ship. And then Jim went to Dr. Livesey and Captain Smollett and Squire Trelawney and told them, what he saw and what he heard. I guess he heard it. He was in the apple barrel. And then third, maybe, they got to the island. Some of them disembarked. They got off the ship, and they're going to go explore. So we don't know yet what the climax or turning point is, but the climax of your story, climax is the peak, okay? What's the tip top of the action. So it's sort of like slow, not much going on, and then starting to increase and increase and increase and increase. And then this peak, this climax, is where the biggest, most action happens. So maybe, and I'm just guessing, because remember I haven't read Treasure Island completely yet. I've only read chapter 4 with you guys. Maybe it's going to be a giant fight between all the good guys and all the pirates on the island. Okay, and that's going to be the turning point of the story. And then after the turning point, after the climax, the action starts to descend again. It's declining action. So they resolved their problems. Whoever wins the fight, you know, maybe they get the treasure and they get to go back home. So actions, you know, it's kind of calming down after that. So this is the resolution. How does the story end? How do they solve their problem? Okay, so I would draw arrows to kind of each part because it's sort of just like a little bit weird. These ones make sense as they're rising, but your introduction and your problem and your conflict come first. Then action's gonna rise, the biggest, craziest part of your story, and then calming down to your resolution. Okay, so you're not coming up with brand new information. Remember, these all come from right here. Introduction, problem, conflict, rising action, climax, resolution. So that's all you have to do to start planning your story. In the next lesson, so lesson 8, we're gonna start writing our introduction. So knowing your characters and your setting are very important. Right now, we gotta start nailing those down. You gotta start coming up with very detailed descriptions of your character and your setting. Some of these though, like the later rising action thing, or maybe you don't know exactly what your turning point in your story is gonna be yet, and that's okay. Maybe you don't know the ending yet, but we gotta start thinking about these things. So fill out as much of these 2 pages, 57 and 59, as you can, because this unit is coming to a close very quickly. We're about halfway done already. Actually, we're exactly halfway done. There are 14 lessons. This is lesson 7. We're halfway done. So that's all you got to do for this lesson. Remember, you have to read chapter 4. Don't forget to do that. And then just complete pages 57 and 59 in your workbook. And that's it. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Miss you.